Imagine the wisdom of over 650 books within a single book and 7 objectives you've never heard of before. Now imagine a video that distills this book and these 7 objectives in a practical way, giving you a step-by-step process to reinvent yourself into your best version, the one capable of achieving every single goal you set. Well, that book exists. It's called arete, a Greek word I have tattooed on my wrist that we translate as excellence or virtue, but it has a deeper meaning that we are going to talk about very soon. And that video also exists, and it's the one you're watching right now. Now, I met the author of this masterpiece, Brian Johnson, in 2022. Brian dedicated and dedicates his life to studying and sharing life-changing ideas in a practical way. He and the team at Heroic built an app that, as of today, contains the big ideas he extracted from 702 books on various personal development topics. I was trained and coached by him, and since then, very few people have had a stronger impact on my life than Brian and the ideas he shared. In fact, in less than 6 months of going through his coach training program, I had already become a completely different person. My focus, energy, mental toughness, they all just went through the roof. And if I could restart my self-development journey, go back 4 or 5 years ago, what we're going to cover today is exactly what I would focus on. Now, this video isn't like others about reinventing yourself in 3 months or getting ahead of 99% of the people. This video tries to be an operating manual for your life, a true roadmap for your self-improvement. Now, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, but if we take that step in the wrong direction, we can wind up 2,000 miles away from our desired destination. Our first mission then is to know the right direction, which Ryan helps us figure out in objective number 1. Know the ultimate game. I think we can all agree that happiness is the ultimate game we are playing. We are all in the pursuit of living in a happy life, but we need to understand what happiness really is and what truly makes human beings happy. So let's invite Aristotle and Martin Seligman, the founder of the positive psychology movement, as proxies for ancient wisdom and modern science. We ask them what's the ultimate purpose of life, and they both give us a one-word answer. Aristotle tells us that the summum bonum, the greatest good of life, is to live what he described as eudaimonia. Then he explains that eudaimonia comes from 2 little Greek words, eudaimon, or good soul. He tells us that we have a guiding spirit within, and living in integrity with that best version of ourselves is what will bring us the ultimate sense of joy, well-being, and happiness we are looking for. We used to translate it as happiness, but a more accurate translation of eudaimonia is to flourish. Martin Seligman agrees with Aristotle, and instead of saying anything, he just shows us the cover of his most recent book, Flourish. Now, it's important to emphasize that flourishing is not the same as pleasure. It probably doesn't feel pleasurable or enjoyable in the moment. At the end of the day, it's about doing the hard work to evolve into a better version of yourself again and again. It requires effort and for you to feel uncomfortable, as your infinite potential exists on the other side of your comfort zone. But as human beings, we are wired to feel true happiness in that process, especially if we help others along the way, as we are going to talk about in the objectives that follow. Studies have found time and time again that happy people have projects. They challenge themselves, they make the hard choices like eating healthier, working out, etc. And over time, this leads them to an easier life. And you may know this within you already, but it is exactly the opposite of what society and influencers are selling you. They want you to believe that happiness comes from achieving X, Y, and Z, a new job or phone or car, that once you are free from pain, uncertainty, and hard work, you'll enjoy your life. And this keeps you on a hedonic treadmill, chasing the next shiny object that will finally solve all your problems. And you lose all your personal power as you start to think happiness comes from the outside in and not from the inside out. Of course, this is an illusion, and we see countless examples of people today who have everything they could ever have, and yet they are far from being happy. Now, if the ultimate game is to live with eudaimonia or to flourish, the next question is, well, how do we do that? Aristotle smiles and also answers with a single word. He tells us that the way in which we experience and live with eudaimonia is by living with arete, which we translate as virtue or excellence, but it has a deeper meaning, something closer to expressing the best version of yourself moment to moment to moment. And that's why, as a reminder, I have tattooed the word arete on my wrist. In the words of Martin Seligman, who also agrees with what Aristotle said over 2,300 years ago, we flourish by putting our virtues in action. And when ancient wisdom and modern science are telling us exactly the same things, I think we would be wise to be paying attention. Brian explains it to us this way. If you're capable of being this version of yourself, yet you are being this version of yourself, it's in this gap where regret, anxiety, disillusionment exist. You close the gap by living with arete, by expressing that best version of yourself right now. And right now you experience that eudaimonic joy. And in other words, it's what Abraham Maslow describes in the hierarchy of needs. To the extent you've taken care of your more basic needs, the need to self-actualize becomes as fundamental as the need to breathe if you want to live a happy life. In fact, he tells us that if you deliberately plan on being less than who you're capable of being, then I'm worried that you'll be deeply unhappy for the rest of your life. Again, we are wired as human beings to feel true happiness in the process towards evolution. And if this is the ultimate game, you want to make everything a part of your practice to get better at it. Every moment becomes an opportunity to practice your philosophy and show up at your best. And everything suddenly gains much more meaning because it's all part of the same game and you're playing it all day, every day. For instance, when I'm brushing my teeth, I might slow down and think of what's this moment asking from me? How would the best version of myself show up? Maybe I'm a bit more present, with better posture, without negative thoughts, and grateful for my life. But what's really interesting is that this idea can change your life right now because it depends much less on what you are doing and much more on how you are doing it. So you don't even need to change a single thing in the external world to start living with a little more arete. Never perfectly, but more and more consistently. But knowing the ultimate game is not enough. Like athletes, we need to know the right rules and learn the right skills. How do we become incredibly great at this game, especially when life gets tough? Well, this brings us to objective number 2, which is to forge anti-fragile confidence. On it, we are going to explore rule number 1 and skill number 1 to develop. Now, I like to imagine rule number 1 of this ultimate game as a coin with two sides. The first side tells us that it is not supposed to be easy. And the story you may be telling yourself about the fact that it should be easy and that you must be doing something wrong in your life if it is not easy is arguably the number 1 obstacle to you enjoying the process of living a great and noble life. Brian uses the metaphor that a hero out on their heroic quest is battling dragons, not sidestepping lizards. Think about your favorite hero's journey story, right? Is it Harry Potter, The Matrix, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars? You would walk out of the movie theater if your hero didn't face challenges, and if your hero didn't at times feel overwhelmed. Of course they do, they should, and so should you. And if you aren't willing to embrace those challenges and create a life in which you are going to be challenged, you are going to want to walk out of your life just like you would want to walk out of that movie. And like everything worth doing in life, it is not only supposed to be challenging, but as the other side of the coin tells us, it is never going to be easy. We are never going to be exonerated from pain, uncertainty, and constant work. And nothing is wrong with you for not having reached that place where life is easy and you are in a state of complete peace and joy every minute of your life. And again, I know this is exactly the opposite to what society in general is telling you. But as we described in the video where we summarized the lessons from Phil Stadt's book, Lessons for Living, this is an illusion. And if you choose to believe this illusion, you'll be unhappy. You'll believe that something is wrong with you and your life and that the world is against you or whatever. And obviously life gets better as you build your character and act with virtue. Your highs become higher, your lows become higher. But what's crucial to understand is that there is no there. You're never going to get to a place where you're done doing the work to live life fully. And this is what the most rich, famous, and hot people realize once they get to the top of these society games. And that's why they have even higher rates of depression, addictions, and suicide than the rest of us. So let's quit telling ourselves the story that it should be easy or that we should already be at a place in our evolution where things aren't hard. In every moment, Abraham Maslow tells us, you have a choice. You can either step forward into growth or back into safety. The arete game, if you will, is about being aware of the micro decisions that you take every day, connecting to your best version and taking that step forward. So we understand rule number 1, not supposed to be easy plus never going to be easy. Now there is a skill that if we focus on developing, this rule not only becomes something to accept, but rather something to love. It becomes our competitive advantage. With it, adversity starts working for us rather than against us. This is the skill that gives this objective its name, and it's that we want to forge anti-fragile confidence. The basic idea is that you can be fragile, and when life hits you, you break easily, or you can be resilient, which is basically life hits you and you can withstand a lot more and you bounce back faster. But there is something even more powerful than being resilient, because if you think about it, resilience is not exactly the opposite of what being fragile is. For lack of a better word, the opposite would be to be anti-fragile. What does that mean? That literally, the more life hits you, not only do you recover faster, but you become stronger, you grow. So imagine you're a box package and you're going out in the mail and you have a label stick into your package. Is it fragile? Handle me with care, I break easily? Is it resilient? You can be a little bit rougher with me, but don't be too rough? Or is it anti-fragile? Please kick me around, because the more you hit me, the stronger I get. When life kicks us around, what would happen if we could literally be anti-fragile and get stronger with every single obstacle we face? Well, that's what we want to cultivate. In his book Anti-Fragility, Nassim Taleb tells us that a wind extinguishes a candle, but fuels a fire. You want to become that fire. And the good news is that it doesn't come from genetics, luck, or life circumstances. You can train yourself to become this fire. How? Well, first you want to accept everything that life brings you. As Byron Katie tells us, when I argue with reality I lose, but only 100% of the time. If you resist what's happening, if you believe that whatever you're experiencing shouldn't be happening, there is no way in which you'll be able to use that adversity as fuel for your growth. Of course, this is not easy. In fact, we just saw it in rule number 1, and especially with the big things in life. That's why you want to practice with the small. Make the small irritants of your day-to-day an opportunity to practice your philosophy and grow the fire. So don't complain, don't criticize, don't make excuses, and focus on what you can control, accepting what you can't control. Second, you want to shift from a fixed to a growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their abilities are fixed and see failing at something as a sign of their limits of their qualities, so they fear and avoid challenges. People with a growth mindset believe that their abilities, such as intelligence or mental toughness, can be developed through effort and perseverance. They know they can get better at anything through practice. They know that obstacles make them stronger, and they know that if it is getting difficult, then they are exposing themselves to what they need to improve. So people with a growth mindset not only approach challenges, but they thrive on them. Third, you want to understand what confidence means and how to cultivate it. Highly confident people have a sense of faith and certainty. In what? In that things will go perfectly and that your plans will go through just as you imagine them? Of course not. That would be ridiculous. They have confidence in themselves, in that they have what it takes to respond to whatever life throws at them, overcome obstacles, and make things happen. As a result, they have the inner strength to take that step forward into growth. They don't need to know more or learn more or craft the perfect plan to start taking action. They don't need complete certainty, which is an illusion, as we already mentioned. Instead, they have faith in their actions and they know they will succeed as long as they continue to take action and don't give up. So how do you develop confidence in yourself? Well, just like you would with any other relationship. It is very simple. You do what you say you will do. If you were to hire me as your coach and I am late for our first session, you might think something strange happened and forgive me. But if I am late to the second session and then to the third one, you'll stop trusting me, and that third session would be the last one we would have together. The relationship you have with yourself is no different. If you said you were going to work out, meditate, eat healthy, work on your business, whatever, and you don't do it, that's not free. Your subconscious will notice, and it will start losing confidence in your ability to do what needs to be done to deal with life's inevitable challenges. You do this all day, every day, and you shouldn't feel confident. You shouldn't feel powerful. You shouldn't feel anti-fragile. So start by making less commitments, because sometimes it is true that we are our worst bosses and we commit to way too much. And then follow them. Send that message to yourself all day, every day. We'll talk more about how to master yourself and cultivate the ability to do what you say you will do in objective number 5, where you'll learn how to build new habits and break bad ones, even if you fail at that over and over again. For now, practice with the small. Have a clear goal with everything before you start doing it. Things like, okay, I will clean all these dishes. I will meditate for 5 minutes. I will focus for 30 minutes in this project. Say the commitment to yourself, make it explicit, and then follow it. Also know that confidence erodes the more time you let pass between idea and execution. So take advantage of that initial inspiration and act in a fast and decisive way. Forging anti-fragile confidence is what enables you to play this game well. Think about it. What do most people do when life gets hard? They don't feel like working out, taking care of their sleep, avoiding distractions, etc. They enter a downward spiral, digging a deeper and deeper hole from which it is increasingly difficult to escape. But what if the worse you feel, or the more life hits you, you somehow stay committed to your protocol, doing the things that are good for you and avoiding things that are bad for you? How would your life have been different until now? How many down spirals could you have avoided? This is the essence of anti-fragile confidence. The worse you feel and the less you feel like it, the more committed you are to your protocol. This is how you become that fire. Obstacles literally make you stronger. And of course, this presupposes you have a protocol, that you know what you do and what you don't do when you are at your best. And this is when we move to objective number 3, optimize the big 3. If you've been into self-development before, you know how overwhelming it can get. In the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey tells us to identify our roles and goals for each of those roles. And that's great, but it can get very overwhelming very fast. We have nearly infinite roles if we think about them. Tony Robbins, who is another proxy of the self-development world, suggests something similar with his categories of improvement. And one of the greatest lessons Brian taught me is how to simplify self-development. He tells us it's all about the big 3, our energy or health, our work, and our love or relationships. And our mission is to focus on these 3 big categories day in and day out, and we'll live our best lives as a result. At first, I sort of resisted this idea. Where does the mind go? Where does the inner work or spirituality go? Where does learning go? But I slowly started organizing my efforts into these 3 buckets, and it simplified my life, helping me stay focused on what actually matters. Brian also found 3 categories to help us optimize the big 3, which are identity, virtues, and target. So first, we want to know who we are at our best in each category. Maybe the best version of yourself energy-wise shows up in the gym like an elite athlete, putting in the effort that an elite athlete would put. That is your guiding identity. Then you identify the virtues that identity embodies. Maybe you are disciplined or joyful or present, and you commit to putting your virtues in action. Finally, you set your targets. What does this best version of you do and don't do? Brian encourages us to identify the top 3 daily targets for each of the big 3, and that is your protocol, what you commit to doing every day, especially when you don't feel like it. The heroic app I mentioned in the intro is basically built around the big 3 to help us move from theory to practice to mastery. It also includes Brian's notes from the books he read and resources like Basic Training, where he walks us through the 7 objectives in greater detail. On it, you'll also get to see my own identities, virtues, and targets that I commit to every day. I'll leave a link for a free 30-day trial of this app in the description below, and I recommend using those 30 days to get clear on your protocol and go through Basic Training. In addition, I've created a guide with journaling exercises for you to identify your big 3, craft your protocol, and to help you implement the teachings of the other objectives as well. I will remind you of these resources at the end of the video, so don't worry about them now. Goals matter. Aristotle tells us that we are teleological beings, meaning that we are driven by goals. And modern science, again, confirms that happy people have goals. However, most people set New Year's resolution and forget them by February. Instead, we want to set new days resolution and live in day-tight compartments. Move from theory to practice today. How do we do that? Well, Brian dedicates an entire objective in the book to this, and it's objective number 4. Make today a masterpiece. You know all that time you're wasting by living on autopilot, spending all your days scrolling, complaining, arguing with reality? Well, you're not getting that time back. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is your one life. All that matters is what you do today. You forget about this because you numb yourself with information overload and stimulation. You forget that you need to show up with intensity and a sense of grounded urgency. But today's the day to practice your philosophy. Today is the day to show up as the best version of yourself. You need to stop getting ready to live and actually start living. So stop planning how you will crash your nutrition or workouts or sleep or work or relationships, and start improving them and start taking action. Objective 4 is all about answering the question, how can we master the art of making today a masterpiece? And this could be, of course, an entire set of videos, but we'll focus on 3 main ideas today. First, let's talk about checklists. In a 3-month experiment, 8 different hospitals around the world implemented a checklist for conducting surgeries. The surgical checklist was stupidly simple, so simple that many surgeons who trained for decades to do what they do thought it was laughably useless. It included very basic things like each member of the surgical team introducing themselves and confirming which side of the body the surgery would be performed on. But the results from that super simple checklist were so astonishing that no hospital would think of conducting a surgery without it today. In those 3 months, the rate of serious complications for surgical patients fell by 36% and deaths fell by 47%. How is that even possible? Well, checklists help us avoid the dual focus of figuring out what to do and trying to do it at the same time. They free up our cognitive resources, allowing us to focus solely on execution instead of in strategy and execution. For our purposes today, we want a super simple checklist to reduce the mortality rate of our masterpiece days. So what are the 3 things you do when you have your best days? Keep it short, precise, and practical. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it will give you a North Star for your day. The second idea is bookends. Brian calls the beginning and end of our days the AM and PM bookends. He emphasizes that we tend to have more control over those periods of our days than the rest of the day. He encourages us to integrate our most important habits into our AM and PM routines. Most people focus on their morning routine first, right? The famous morning routine. But your day actually starts the night before. Because by consistently executing your end of day protocols, you wake up feeling more energized and ready to crash the AM bookend. So let's start there. What's one thing you could do to create a stronger PM ritual? What's one thing you could stop doing at night? And then how would you start your day if you were fully committed to making it a masterpiece? How would your AM bookend look like? And what's the one thing you will change? The third idea is Kaizen, or continuous improvement. Think about your protocol as a constant and never-ending improvement game. Remember that there is no there, and it won't ever be perfect. And approach it like a scientist. Conduct experiments, stay curious about what's working and what needs work. Things like, oh, I ate a bit later yesterday and my sleep suffered. Oh, I wrote in the afternoon instead of in the morning and I was extremely unproductive. Oh, I worked out in the morning instead of in the evening for a week, and I went to the gym all the days I intended to go. And before, I used to procrastinate on that. When you notice something like this, just say to yourself, interesting. Without guilt or shame or judgment, just pure curiosity. Make connections and run the 1, 2, 3 optimize protocol that Brian first taught me in the Heroic Coach program. You first ask yourself, what went well? Then what needs work? And then how will I optimize going forward? What's one thing I will start or stop doing? You want to make it a game, and when you are not at your best, you focus on less. Your goal is to rebound as fast as possible from any setbacks, not to follow the most extreme protocol. But even with all of that in mind, we both know that it's really easy to craft these plans and think about them, but it's extremely hard to execute them consistently. Fortunately, there are science-based methods to turn these plans into habits, which we'll explore in the next objective: master yourself. How can we create exceptionally high levels of discipline? How can we get to a point where what's good for us becomes the easy thing to do? Well, Brian boils down the science of habits in one phrase. You want to use your willpower wisely to install habits that run on autopilot via algorithms. Let's unpack each part. First, you need to use your willpower wisely. Let's say you want to stop eating the sugary cookies you're addicted to. Roy Baumeister, the world's leading expert on willpower, tells us that the most disciplined among us don't use their willpower to live with many temptations. Instead of buying those cookies and then trying not to eat them, they buy their willpower at the store and decide to never buy the tempting cookies again. Scientists call these pre-commitment strategies Odysseus contracts. In Greek mythology, after Odysseus spends 10 years at the Trojan War, he almost gets home to Ithaca before being blown back by the winds. He eventually lands on the island of the goddess Kirke. She tells Odysseus that he will have to get by the sirens and that he needs to be very careful. Odysseus laughs. How could they possibly harm them? Kirke tells him their seductive songs have killed countless sailors and advises him to put beeswax in his sailor's ears. Now Odysseus really wanted to hear the songs, so she advised him instead to have his men tie him to the mast of his ship so he couldn't escape. And that's how you play offense with your willpower. You know you will be tempted, so you commit your future self to a specific course of action. For pre-commitments to work, they need to be clear. You want to operate with bright lines. When Brian wanted to quit eating fast food, he initially had a fussy goal to eat at McDonald's less often. But every time he drove by one, he would ask himself, is today the day that I get to go there? And he started negotiating with himself. One day he decided he would never eat at McDonald's again, period. And he broke that commitment a few times before it stuck. But at least then, he knew he was breaking a contract with himself. And this brings us to a truth that is somewhat paradoxical, which is that making a 100% commitment is much easier than making a 90% commitment or even a 99% commitment. Because that's when you avoid negotiating with yourself, and that's when you realize you are using your willpower wisely. The second part of the phrase is that you install habits that run on autopilot via algorithms. BJ Fogg, one of the world's leading authorities on the science of habits, tells us that a behavior happens when three elements come together: motivation, ability, and prompt. Motivation is your desire to do the behavior. Ability is your capacity to do the behavior, and prompt is your cue or trigger to do the behavior. Since we can't control our motivation, when we are trying to install a new habit, we want to make it obvious and easy, playing with ability and prompt. Make it obvious by having a super clear prompt. Use what scientists call implementation intentions, or what Brian calls algorithms, which are basically if-then statements. For example, if or after brushing my teeth, then I'm going to do 10 push-ups. And playing with the ability element, you want to make it easy by designing your days for when you are least motivated. If you aim to do 100 push-ups, for example, it's just not going to work. Instead, you commit to doing 10 push-ups, and on your most inspired days, maybe you can go up to 100 or whatever you want. But the next day, you commit to continuing with those 10 push-ups. Now, if we want to delete a bad habit, we want to do the opposite. We want to make it invisible and hard. If you want to lower your screen time, install an app like Opal, which blocks distracting apps. The last thing to keep in mind is avoiding missing twice in a row. If you skip a habit, make it your top priority to do it the next day. Habits are hard to install, but easy to maintain. However, if you miss twice in a row or more, it will be as if you've never put in the work to build it in the first place. This is why the most important days for building habits are not when you do everything perfectly, but when you bounce back after failing. Now that we have the tools to master ourselves, let's look at what we should focus on first. That's exactly what Objective 6, Dominate the Fundamentals, is all about. Imagine you're at a construction site. If you wanted to guess how tall the building they are building is going to be, without looking at the architect's plans or asking anyone, what do you think is the best way to figure out? Well, it turns out you just need to look at how deeply they are digging its foundations. Brian likes to think of our foundations or fundamentals on two different levels, the universal and the specific. We all share the need for mastery around the universal fundamentals that are the ones we'll focus on today, which are eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, and focusing. Not only will it be impossible for us to build a great life if we can get out of bed with energy, but 90% of our psychology is determined by our physiology. It is literally the number one lever you can pull to be more joyful, motivated, energized, productive, and connected. So let's start with our nutrition. For the last 25 years, Brian has experimented with pretty much every single nutritional philosophy out there. He's been vegan, paleo, keto, etc. And although he doesn't defend any particular nutritional philosophy, he does believe we can boil down the essential truth in a few general rules we would be wise to consider. The first rule is to quit drinking your sugar. If you are currently drinking sodas or any liquid with sugar, this is arguably the fastest and easiest way to take your nutrition to the next level. Rule number 2, and my favorite one, is to eat real food and throw out the factory food. Consider reducing or eliminating 3 types of factory food. First, ultra-processed foods with ingredients you can't pronounce, don't have in your pantry, and didn't evolve to consume. Then, factory-farmed or feedlot animals for ethical, health, and environmental reasons. If you consume animals, ensure they are grass-fed and raised freely as much as you can. And thirdly, factory fat, including vegetable oils like soybeans, sunflower, corn, and canola, none of which existed pre-industrial revolution, and all of which disrupt our omega-3 to 6 ratios and create inflammation. Rule number 3 is to eat within a time-restricting window. Research is clear that when you eat matters as much as what you eat. Give yourself at least 13 hours between your last meal of the day and your first meal of the day. And especially focus your efforts on having your last bite of food at least 2 hours before your bedtime. The second fundamental is moving. We'll explore 3 key ideas here, and you'll realize how true the statement of psychology driven by physiology is. First, we have exercise. In The How of Happiness, Sonia Lyubomirsky tells us about a study that randomly assigned clinically depressed individuals into 3 groups: exercise, antidepressant medication, or both exercise and antidepressant medication. After 4 months, exercise alone was just as effective at treating depression as was the medication or the combination of exercise plus the medication. If you stop for even a second to think about that, it's incredible. Now, the second thing to understand here is that movement transcends and includes exercise. You don't want to be active and sedentary. You don't want to work out for an hour and then be all day seated. Exercise is just a small circle inside the bigger circle of movement. You want to find and create opportunities to move. Brian's main advice here is to set a timer for about 15 to 20 minutes when you are sitting down. Every time it goes off, you might stand up, stretch a bit, do a few sets of burpees, and then just get back to your chair and restart that timer. Third, we have steps. In her book, The Joy of Movement, Kelly McGonigal tells us that the average daily step count required to induce feelings of anxiety and depression and decrease satisfaction with life is 5,649. In other words, if we take that amount of steps or less, we are going to induce all these feelings. Now, what's interesting is that the average human across the globe falls below this threshold at 4,961 steps. The next fundamental is sleep. Matthew Walker, one of the leading researchers on the science of sleep, tells us he used to think sleep was a pillar of health, but now he thinks it's the foundation on which the other pillars rest. How much sleep are you getting right now? Are you getting the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep? And if you're like, I get 5, 6 hours, sometimes maybe 7, and I'm fine, it is because you feel so tired, you don't even know how tired you feel. And the odds of you being the person that can get away with less than the 7 to 9 hours of sleep, according to Matthew Walker and other researchers, are about the odds of getting struck by lightning, 1 in 11,000. Now, to prioritize and improve our sleep, we want to dial in our PM bookend, as we learned in Objective 4, by creating algorithms, as we learned in Objective 5. If it is 7 p.m. or whatever time it is for you, then shutdown complete, I'm done with work. If the sun has gone down, then I'm thinking about my own digital sunset. And at least an hour before I go to bed, I quit blowing up my brain with blue light stimulation from screens. If it is 8:30 p.m., then I'm having my last bite of food, so I can get 2 hours of digestion before lying down. So what do you do from 6 p.m. onward? What's your PM bookend? And are you working it? Next, we have breathing. And yes, how you breathe is as important as your nutrition, movement, and sleep. You can live for weeks without food, days without water, and only minutes without oxygen. Yet, how often do you think about it? And do you specifically train your breathing to make sure it is optimized? Brian tells us that if we are like most people, the answer to those questions are never and no. And after reading basically every great book on the science of breathing, Brian identified the 3 simple rules of optimal breathing. You want to breathe in through your nose, down into your belly, and make the exhale slightly longer than the inhale. Try them now and you'll see how great you feel only after one breath. Especially if you're a mouth breather, this will change your life. You'll feel way more energized and calm throughout the day. And you can train yourself to breathe through your nose by being intentional about it and maybe using a mouth tape when sleeping. Finally, we have focusing, which if you've been following along, you know it can easily be my favorite one. Until now, we've been taking our energy to higher levels. The focusing fundamental is not only about increasing, in this case, our mental energy, but about focusing all that energy into what's important now. Scientists tell us that the happiest among us have a spotlight of attention and can focus where they want, when they want, and for how long they want. And if there is one thing that our modern environment has destroyed more than anything, is our ability to do exactly that. Scientists also tell us that the unhappiest among us tend to ruminate about whatever is bothering them. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind, particularly if that wandering leads you to chew over and over again on the same negative thoughts. So if you develop the ability to focus your mind away from those anxiety-provoking thoughts and into what's important now, then you'll be much happier than what you currently are. How can you do this? Well, first you reduce your inputs. As we mentioned in past videos, we get more inputs in one day today than in an entire lifetime 500 years ago. The only possible way to regain control of your attention is to conquer your digital addiction. Second, you want to meditate. Think of meditation as strength training for your mind. You start by picking an anchor, like your breathing, and when you deviate from that anchor and you realize that happened, you gently bring your attention back to your anchor. That's basically what meditation is. And every time you go through that process, you strengthen your focus muscle. Third, you want to make everything a part of your practice. You keep an attitude similar to the one you have when meditating as you go throughout the day. Right now, what's the most important thing? You focus your attention on that. You notice when it sleeps and you are going to do something that you know is not the most important next thing, whether that's checking Instagram again or looking at your phone when your family is right there, whatever it is. You train yourself to bring your focus back to what's actually most important right now. And what happens when you put all of what we talked about together? It's time to wrap things up with objective number 7, activate your superpower. Every single thing we've gone over thus far is to get us to this point. We know the ultimate game we're playing. We know we need to forge anti-fragile confidence, getting stronger with every challenge life throws at us. We do this by working our protocol. The worse we feel, the more committed we are to our big 3, energy, work, and love, identities, virtues, targets. When? Of course, today, as we master ourselves and dominate the fundamentals. You focus your energy on what's most important now. You close the gap over and over again, living with arete and experiencing eudaimonia. Never perfectly, but more and more consistently. And the magic of the compound effect eventually appears. All those efforts you put in and keep putting in get stored and suddenly they become evident. Something changed. You've transformed into a new human being. You've evolved. And people feel it. Being around you is different. They can't explain, but it's real. What happened is that you've activated what Brian calls your soul force. It's the only single quality all the heroes across history had in common. It is the direct result of living in integrity with your highest ideals and values. It is the force you just feel when you're around the heroes in your life, around the people you truly admire. In order for you to truly activate this superpower, there is only one more thing we need to cover. And that's the true definition of hero. The etymology of the word hero doesn't refer to killer of bad guys or something like that. Hero literally means protector. The hero has strength for 2 and has done the hard work of cultivating that strength for 2. And their secret weapon is love. They do this hard work in service of something bigger than themselves. That's where that superpower gets activated. Whether it's for their families or children or co-workers or the community or all of them, they understand that they have gifts and that they need to give those gifts to the world. Remember that it's all about action, and remember what Abraham Maslow told us at the beginning. If you deliberately plan on being less than who you're capable of being, then I warn you, you'll be deeply unhappy for the rest of your life. Now, as you start implementing this stuff, one of the things you will think about is, why have I waited so long? why haven't I heard of this before? Or if I have heard of this, why haven't I actually paid attention and applied this stuff? And yes, it is unfortunate that we have all wasted so much time living at less than our best, but it's simply unforgivable to wait any longer. So as you go out there, remember, this is not a dress rehearsal. Today is the day for you to move from theory to practice to mastery. Also remember to download the guide with the journaling exercises linked in the description below. And if you want to explore the Heroic app or the basic training or any of the resources I mentioned throughout the video, you'll also find a set of links at the end of the guide and in the description as well. And finally, if you got this far, I just want to thank you for your time and attention and to wish you the best for your life. You might want to share this video with someone you care about that you think might need to watch this. And please let me know what you think of these longer guides in the comments below or by just leaving a thumbs up. A big hug, and I'll see you in the next one.